All right, the next question's on the sample release test questions for the California High School Exit Exam. Number 11. Some students attend school 180 of the 365 days in a year. About what part of the year do they attend school? So the key word there is what part of the year do they attend school? So this is what I call a part-to-whole relationship. And whenever you have a part-to-whole relationship, you know you're dealing with fractions. So here we go. And so it's a part of a whole. And this is how you write it, by definition. Right? And so the whole year is 365 days. And the part of the whole year that I attend school is 180. What percent is this? Is it 18, 50, 75, or 180? Well, what you want to do is you want to think about what this is about. And if you remember, this is about, if I were to reduce it, about 1/2. And 1/2 is equal to 50%. So that is your answer. Now I want to make one clarifying comment here. How did I know that 180 is about half of 365? Well, I know that 360, if I divide it by 2, I get 1, 8, 0. 180. So what that means is that 180 is half of 360. And 365, here's the key, 365 is very close to 360. And so you could assume that 365 is close enough to 360 so that when you take 180 over 360, you get about 1/2, right? It equals 1/2. So 180 over 365 is still about 1/2. Right? So that's how you do that. Little mental math. What number is equal to 3/8? So we're looking at decimals here. So how do I convert a fraction to a decimal? And that's what it says. These are all decimals, so how do I convert a fraction to a decimal? You divide the denominator into the numerator. So 8 does not fit into 3, 0 times. Add a 0 and a decimal. 8 fits into 30, 3 times. Subtract and bring down a 0. Since 8 doesn't fit into 6, we need to add another 0. 8 does fit into 67 times. 8 times 7 is 56. And you did before, 8 does not fit into 4, bring down a 0. 8 does fit into 40, 5 times. And you stop because you get a remainder of 0. And so what we're saying is that 3/8 is 375 thousandths, which is the next question. Last year, 7/16 of all students at a school participated in the science fair. What percent of the students participated? So the idea here is to go from fraction. We're going to convert the fraction to a decimal. And then once we convert the fraction to a decimal, we change the decimal to a percent. Okay? So the fraction, 7 over 16. Changing that to a decimal, 16 divides into 17, and I will just work that out over here. 16 divides into 7, 0 times. 16 goes into 70. How many times? Well, if I go 5, it's 80. So maybe it's 4. So we get 24. Carry the 2, we get 64. Subtract, and we get 6. Bring down to 0. No. Does 16 go into 60? Probably 3 times, right? And so I'll stop there because I already see that it's going to be about 44. I see that already. That's close. So, but if I multiply 3, you get 16 is 18. Carry the 1, you get 48. I'm going to stop there. So I already know this is about 0.43. Move it over 2 spots, and It's about 43%. And I stopped a little early. This one's the closest answer, right? So we're thinking it's 44%, since that's the closest answer. Moving on. Oh, by the way, before I move on, fraction, decimal, move it to the right 2 spots, percent. Fraction, decimal, percent. Okay, the cost of an afternoon movie ticket last year was $4. This year, an afternoon movie ticket costs $5. What is the percent increase of the ticket from last year to this year? So anytime you're answering these types of questions, you want to remember that the amount of change right? Amount of change. So what was the change between the numbers? What's that amount? So you subtract over the original amount before the change, right? And so the amount of change is found by taking these two numbers and subtracting them. Now remember, you want to subtract them so that you have a positive answer. And the original amount goes here. So we'll start with $5 subtracted by 4. And the original amount was $4, right? Before it increased to $5. So we end up with 5 minus 4 is 1 and over 4. So that's my fraction. To change that to a percent, I will divide and then move the decimal over 2 spots to the right. Or you may have memorized already that 1/4 is 25%. 1/4 out of 4 is 25 cents, right? And so the answer is C. If you did not know that, then you'd have to work this out the long way. You'd have to say, okay, denominator goes into the numerator 0 times. Add a decimal, bring it up, add a 0. 4 goes into 10 twice. 8 subtract, you get 2, add a 0. 4 goes into 25 times, and you get a remainder of 0. And so it's 0.25. 0.25, move it over 2 spots to the right. It's 25%. Okay. Next question. The weekly sales of a magazine increased from 500,000 to 600,000. By what percent did the magazine sales increase? Again, it's the same idea, guys. It's the change in the amount, so 600,000 minus 500,000 all over the original amount of 500,000. And so we end up with 100,000 over 500,000. And I forgot a 0 here, so let's fix that. And so you can cross off the zeros to the right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's 1/5. 1 out of 5. Again, that's one you could memorize. It's going to be 20%. But if you haven't memorized that, then you would take 5, the denominator, into the numerator. 5 goes into 1 0 times. Add a decimal and a 0. 5 goes into 10 twice. 5 times 2 is 10. Remainder of 0. The decimal note says 0.2. Moving it over 2 spots to the right, you end up with 20.0, which is 20%. Okay? Okay, same idea here. More of these questions. There's quite a few on the CAHSEE test involving percent of increase and decrease. So we have a clothing store. It's having a sale. The shirts are already priced $20. They're now on sale for $17. What is the percent of decrease in the price of the shirt? So 20 minus 17. How do you find the amount of change? The original amount before it changes $20. So that would be 3 over 20. Okay, now we're going to write this as a percent. So let's change this to a decimal by dividing. So let's do that right here. 20 goes into 3 0 times. Add a decimal point and a 0. 20 goes into 31. 20 times 1 is 20. End up with 10. 20 does not fit into 10, add a 0. But 20 does fit into 100 evenly 5 times. And so you can stop there because you get a remainder of 0. So that's the decimal representation. Move it over 2 spots. You end up with 15%, which is B. Last question. On Monday, Lisa's fishbowl contained 1 gallon of water. On Friday, the fishbowl contained 7,500 gallons of water. By what percent did the amount of water in Lisa's fishbowl decrease? So we're going to want to find the change again of the amount over the original amount. So the change would be 1 gallon. I'm going to add a decimal there. Subtract 7,500 gallons over the original amount of 1 gallon. Now the reason why I added the decimal there is because I want to show you what this would look like if you were to subtract the long way. So 1 subtract 0.75. You always line up decimal points when you add or subtract decimals. And so we're missing a 0 here, so let's add 1. Still 1, right? And so if I were to subtract, I couldn't because I have 0. So you borrow. This becomes 0. This becomes 10. But now you have to subtract 0 from 5. So the 10 becomes a 9 because you borrow one more time. And this becomes a 10. So it's 10 minus 5 is 5. 9 minus 7 is 2. And 0 minus 0 is 0. And so there it is. It's 25 hundredths, or 0.25 over 1. Well, when you divide by 1, you still get the same number. Right? And so moving the decimal over 2 spots to the right will give us a percent, which is 25.0%. And so the answer is C. So that's a wrap. Remember, like I always say, study hard and learn a lot. And we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.